welcome to the MG Leadership Series, where we bring you the hospitality industry's top leaders for actionable insights. I'm happy to welcome today one of Southeast Asia's kind of most sought after hospitality leaders, really popular past guests, Ramesh Jackson, Area Vice President from Marriott. Welcome.
Thank you, Brett. Good to be back here.
Hey, so glad to have you back. And I know a lot of our viewers are also excited to have you back. Our last episode was one of our most popular. And today we're actually going to go and review some of what we talked about last time, as well as talk about 2022 and the year ahead.
Sounds great.
Great.
Let's get started.
Yeah, so today we're back together in person. We're at the Hermitage. It's a Tribute Portfolio Hotel. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this property?
Gladly. So this is one of our collection hotels. It's a Tribute Portfolio Collection hotels. It's, those of you who don't know, it's in Menteng area. It's a great location. It's 90 keys. I call it, it's one of our 90-room mansion in Jakarta. You come in, it's actually a large home. You walk in, it feels like a house, just like a huge lobby for home, right? So it's not a grand lobby, but a beautiful home lobby. The theme is all white, so it's great for weddings. Even in the room, everything is white. It's hard to maintain, but team does a phenomenal job in maintaining. So if you haven't been here, they have great food, one of the best fried rice in town. I got to give that a plug. Come see us at the Hermitage.
It's a really special place. I mean, as soon as you even drive up to the lobby, you can tell there's something really special about this spot. So I'm really happy to be here as the location for us doing this episode of the Leadership Series.
And this is the cigar lounge we are in.
The cigar lounge.
You're wondering.
I don't have a cigar. Maybe later. All right. So we got together in March of 2021. And I think we were both feeling pretty optimistic and excited about the year to come. And we talked some about our key leadership learnings thus far in the pandemic. And I think I was doing it. I'm not sure if you were, but I was definitely doing it from the frame of now we're on the way out of the crisis. And I talked about kind of one of the key leadership failures that I had observed in myself from reading a McKinsey article. And it was called Optimism Bias. And it means leaders are very quick to become overly optimistic about the future. And in times of crisis, it's very important to make sure that you're being realistic. I think I called that out for myself as a key mistake I had made in the first 9 to 12 months of the crisis, and that I was going to improve. But I got to tell you now, coming into 2022, I found myself again being overly optimistic. And now here we are with Omicron, there was PPKM3 off on. So I don't know, how have you done in terms of managing your level of optimism?
I think I'm like you, Brad. I think I'm the same way. I'm very optimistic. I don't think I'll change that. I think it's one of those things, I put people in two different buckets. One is people that look at life as glass half empty and the other is half full. I like to believe, I think you and I look at life as like glass half full. Yes, I think we were both optimistic. And I think maybe now we move towards being cautiously optimistic. But I still think 2022, we'll talk about it more, but I think 2022 is going to be a great year.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge with being an overly optimistic leader is related to a key point you made about one of your learnings. And it's great to be optimistic. Everyone wants to be around an optimist, positive energy, positive vibes. But as a leader with your team looking up to you, the trip that I had, I think, is as you talk about how great things are gonna be, and your team kind of comes along and joins you in that energy when you're wrong and it doesn't come out that way. It's difficult for them. And when you do that multiple times, as we've had in this crisis, like, hey, now good times are ahead. We made it. And it's like over and over. I think this is kind of the key challenge. And one of the key learnings that you said you had during the early stages of the pandemic was that having a personal relationship with your team beyond just work makes all the difference in time of crisis.
It truly does. To go back to your optimism, I think with the team, you're right. When you're leading a team and you are overly optimistic, a team can get disappointed.
Mm.
I think, but I also with my team also knows while we are optimistic, I'm very optimistic, but it's one of those things where you still plan for the worst,
Mm.
right? Yes, we are optimistic. Yes, these are the great things can come. Here's what the top line, the occupancies are going to come in. However, let's always have a plan B. What if? So whilst we are optimistic, we will always have a plan B. My team and I will always have a plan B that we are ready to execute in 30 days.
Mm.
Up looking up 30 days out. So if 30 days out now, PPKM came in, Omicron came in, we have stepped in and said, here's what we're going to do, just in case. Hopefully now they're saying Omicron is not going to be as bad, and PPKM3 has been lifted. So maybe the optimism is paying off. Coming back to your specific questions on being more than work relationship with your team, being close to your team, it's like a piggy bank. I look at it as a piggy bank. I think in good times, in all relationships, you want to fill that piggy bank with love
Mm.
and care and connections. And if you don't do that in good times, in any relationship, and even work, especially work, personal relationship, but work relationship as well, you have nothing to withdraw in bad times, right? So, and it's hard to do. And I struggle now. A lot of places I've gone to Bali, spent some time with the team last week. I'm going to Bandung next week. But my team in other parts of Indonesia, it's a struggle to have the personal connect with them when you're not seeing them. And some of them I haven't met for 2 years now.
Mm.
It is difficult, but I do make an effort to make sure that that phone call goes out if I can't meet them, to build that relationship and make sure that piggy bank is full, that I can draw on in bad times.
So I want to get into our 2021 predictions and see how we did, but one last kind of tie in together with these kind of leadership learnings. So being, you need to be cautiously optimistic. Personal relationship with your team, buys you a lot in time of crisis. Let me bring those two things together and think about a more pragmatic item that I bet many travel seller and travel buyer executives are struggling with, which would be 2022 budgeting.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you kind of pull together the need to, you want to create optimism for your team, for your shareholders around 2022, but you also need to be optimistic. How has Marriott approached, or how have you and your team approached thinking about 2022 budgets?
So we started working on a budget in October. So things are looking slightly different now, right? So in October, we had certain assumptions going in. We said, and we go back to we draw on 2019. So 2019 was this: if this markets are not coming back, how did 2021 shape, and how is 2022 going to shape?
Mm-hmm.
That was 2-3 months ago. We didn't know about Omicron, right? Today it's a little different. Now, are we thinking that we are still budgeting that by July onwards, the international travel will start coming in? Very candidly, I'm supportive of the government's initiative right now, for example, of the 10-day quarantine. I think domestic tourism is helping all of us to a large extent, even in Bali, for example, in November. So we are still hopeful. So to a large extent, we are not actually revising the budget that we did in October. In some cases, we're tweaking it up a little bit because we are seeing stronger performance in markets like Jakarta, Bandung, Surabaya, Jogja, Manado, Makassar. We are all seeing a little bit better than we expected in Q4. And Bali, even Bali. And if the government, and this is kind of a plea to the government as well, if they continue supporting us with meetings and group room nights, it's going to help the industry in a large way. Bali last month for the first time did 35% occupancy. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're coming from 8% and 12%, that's three times the room nights we had in October. And I think December, similarly, we'll do 35, 36%. But again, I want to thank the government because a huge part of the success is coming because the government is supporting us with group room nights in not just in our Marriott hotels, but all the hotels and across Indonesia. And this is just not one market, it's across Indonesia. It's almost 55, 60% of our business in some markets are government groups. With that, and I'm assuming that will continue into first quarter, I am, for those reasons, and that domestic tourism is doing really well, and you have Chinese New Year coming on Feb 1, which is first quarter as well, we're not really changing our budgets, assumptions we made in October. Like I said, if anything, we're taking it up a couple of notches higher.
That's great to hear that you're seeing such great results domestically. For MG, we're also really, really pleased with the domestic recovery. I think when we met recently, I told you we're actually above 2019 on a volume basis, not on a GMV basis, but on a volume basis. We're actually running around 24% above 2019 numbers in December. So that is fantastic, and I'm really happy about the domestic market's confidence. But I can't agree with you on this 10-day quarantine thing. So I get it. I'm really happy with the domestic market, and I want to keep the domestic market confident, strong, and growing. But in my budget for 2022, I was really banking on the Singapore VTL starts to produce. I was banking on Bali inbound beginning to happen in some way from some markets. So when the 10-day quarantine reinstatement came, was it 10-day at one point, then 7, then 3, 4, now we're back at 10. Yeah, I can't understand why we would do that at this stage. So why is it that you're such a supporter of this 10-day quarantine? I can't believe there's many Indonesian hospitality executives out there who are going to be excited about the 10-day quarantine. You're the first.
Well, let me put it this way. One, I didn't budget for international travel coming back for the first 6 months. Right. So while this is the be optimistic but cautious when you're putting numbers together. So we didn't budget for it. So we said,
good on you.
International travelers won't happen till July. That's number one. Domestic tourism is doing well. Why take a risk? By opening up the borders, I'm affected by this 10-day quarantine. I was about to go back to Malaysia on December 17th. I haven't seen my family for 2 years, like a lot of people. Definitely not alone in this. Now we're rethinking because we said, do we really want to come and quarantine ourselves for 10 days?
Is there a quarantine going into Malaysia as well?
There is.
So 7 days. Double. Wow.
But it's home quarantine. You can apply for home quarantine.
Okay.
And so that's okay. But again, yes, it affects me, but I'm more concerned that I'm happy that this will hopefully prevent people like me going back to Malaysia or anywhere and bringing back
Fair enough.
the virus, right?
Fair enough.
Because what will happen is then the government will have no choice but to go back to PPKM4, which means we are back to July. What happened in July, August last year? It killed international travel, which was almost non-existent. And this will kill now domestic tourism as well. So the business, 110% growth you're seeing, which we are seeing as well from 2019 domestic tourism, that will die. So I rather have the 50% market and be safe than get what we might get international. Having said that, I do believe now that we know Omicron is less fatal, I think, again, I'm not getting this from anywhere, but I think the government will reduce the quarantine in the next 30 days. So again, the travel lane, the vaccinated travel lane, all that might kick back in mid-Jan, third week of Jan. I think it still will.
That's pretty specific. It sounds like maybe you have some inside knowledge. Third week of Jan.
Well, we are in second, almost mid-Jan, right? So I think mid-December. I think it'll take them 1 month to really be sure that this virus is not fatal. Because at the end of the day, what we don't want is the hospitals to be inundated, right?
Yeah. So you may have convinced me. Again, fell into optimism bias with assuming that international travel started this month in our forecast. And secondly, it's really important that we protect the volume and the goodness we do have in the domestic market, and placing that at risk by taking risk with inbound, outbound for this new variant wouldn't be wise. Okay. I'm gonna come
Starting
over
to buy into this.
Yes, I'm gonna come over to your side on that. So let's quickly, before we get into our predictions for 2022, and I'm gonna try to curb my optimism bias with my predictions while remaining optimistic, cautiously optimistic. Let's go back and look at, just for fun, in March 2021, you and I made predictions for what do we expect in 2021 for Bali specifically. So what we reviewed was the top inbound markets for Bali in 2019. I don't know, Demas, if you have that content. China was the number one market. 2019 arrivals in Bali. China, Australia, UK, Malaysia.
India, I think was there. Yeah.
So we talked through these markets and we made predictions on, hey, if you believe the volume's going to come back, we should go a level deeper and explain and justify why. So, okay, let's go by the top market, China. Do you believe it will open? So we went through these markets and talked about, is it realistic to think they're going to be coming back to Bali in 2021, and when? So the first market that we talked about was China. And for China, you were very, very bullish that China was going to open by 4Q. And so
did I say what year?
No, I don't know if you said the year, but I felt like it was 2021. So it was going to open in 4Q, and that Bali would be on the list of places that Chinese travelers could visit. And I said, China, not going to happen in 2021. So I'm going to give that's a 1-0.
That's clearly 1-0.
1-0 so far, right? First prediction: will China open? Will Chinese travelers arrive in Bali in 2021? In the second country we talked about was Australia, and you felt like, again, more optimistic than me.
Australia, that optimistic after all.
Australians will be back in December 2021. But I might give you like a half correct, because Australia did, and you said in December, which that's exactly the month when Australia began to allow people to travel again. So I think that was a pretty good insight. But I think Indonesia wasn't on the list of destinations where Australians were headed to.
No, I don't think they banned Indonesia. Indonesia wasn't on the do not travel list, but I don't think they called out Indonesia. But bottom line, they're not here.
Where I was in the same line with China, not going to happen in 2021. So I might call that one close to a tie or a slight lead. 1.1 to.
You can take 2-0.
I'll take 2-0. All right, great. We went on to UK, and we were both in agreement here, and we were quite confident in the fourth quarter of this year, UK citizens will be landing in Bali for sure. For sure. Yeah, we didn't do so well on that one, my friend.
That's 3-1. No.
We'll both get a 0 for that. Yeah. And then we went to India, Russia, and USA. We both thought, okay, for sure, this is also happening maybe even as early as third quarter for those three markets. And then last was Singapore. You're going to catch up on me here. Singapore, you were very confident, not going to actually happen in fourth quarter. Sorry, not going to happen in 2021. But I was very confident Singapore was going to be the first markets back. Clearly, almost happened.
Yeah, almost
the BTL. So 2-1. I'm going to give myself, a small victory.
You got it.
Good playing. So we will revisit our 2022 predictions of the future. So let's move on and talk about 2022. And as you think about your budgeting process, or you think about the region, Southeast Asia, or the market, Indonesia, what are some of kind of your key thoughts about what you're expecting in 2022?
I think from a budgeting perspective, like I said, we have not budgeted for international arrivals till July. end of June, July.
That is
So
not good
Q3,
news for
Q4.
me. That is not good news for me.
But again, maybe we were being a little overly cautious. But we felt even if it happens, it's going to trickle in. To be fair, Bali is open. Bali is open from October 14th. Bali is not shut, right? The challenge now is obviously Indonesia is being very cautious in terms of issuing visa. And this is why I think while we haven't a budget for it, this can still happen relatively quickly. As soon as Indonesia is confident, comfortable, and convinced that it will open the floodgates, I think people will start coming in. It happened in Phuket, happened in Bangkok, it's happening in Maldives, is doing better than 2019. And largely because other destinations are not open, right? Phuket is opening up. I don't know the numbers into Phuket. But as you ease travel restrictions coming in, whilst Bali, the borders are open, the travel restrictions need to be eased as well. I was on another call this morning, and we talked about how countries need to make the travel personalized, digitalized, and seamless. So if I'm going to come into the country on a holiday, it starts from my visa process. That needs to be easy. That needs to be all digitalized. And number two, and when I come into the country, the whole arrival experience, my boss just went to a country who shall remain unnamed, and he said it took him 3 hours to get out of the airport. And other friends similarly have traveled, and it's taken them 3-4 hours to get out of the airport.
I've had six hours.
So now, if you probably would go there because it's business, because it's family, but you would really think hard. If I've going to go on a holiday, one, the visa was difficult to get. I have to spend 6 hours at the airport, and then on top of that, there's quarantine. So with all that has to go away.
And the additional expenses that go along with some of that process. It could be getting your paperwork together. It could be the PCR tests on both ends, et cetera. Insurance required in the case of Thailand.
And here as well, Indonesia is asking you to. So I think once we get through all this, I think that's when the real travel will start happening. So going back to 2022 prediction, I think the Singapore virtual travel lane or vaccinated travel lane will never. I mean, Indonesia has never opened it. Singapore opened it from their side unilaterally. I think that will start again. That will start mid-Jan. I think it'll happen, or maybe after Chinese New Year, because Chinese New Year is February 1 this year. So maybe it's after Chinese New Year. I think the rest of the world will start traveling when countries resolve everything I just spoke of and make the travel seamless again. If you make it difficult, it's going to take longer. So that's why I've hedged and said international travel will not really happen in any significant form till July. But what's encouraging is G20. I see again, I think the government is pushing hard, and I think that's another reason why the government is being very cautious, because they don't want to open the border and be in a situation where we have to go virtual on G20. That's absolutely not worth it. And why I think the government is cautious, and I think they need to be cautious, because G20, we are starting to see tractions. We've already had one meetings in Bali in reference to G20. I think more that those international travelers will come in, and hopefully they stay longer.
I think you make an important point. It's as you think about the reopening, it's important to think about realistically what would a reopening look like. From small things like, a year from now, are we still wearing masks on planes? Yeah. A year from now, are you still taking some form of test before you depart and when you arrive? Easy to imagine. Yeah. A year from now, our country's still requiring you have insurance in order to travel into their country in case you fall ill, right? So a lot of these complexities that are part of the process now, they're going to be there as mandatory steps for at least the medium term, it would seem. So the importance for governments to think about simplifying the overall process and digitizing that so it's easier. Mm-hmm. If I want to go to Bali, it's easy. If I wanted to go to Fuquoc, example. Sorry, if I wanted to go
Bangkok
to
is nice.
Cancun, out of our region, it's complex. But I think it can make a big difference, in your view of that. If it's a one site, one quick process, and you've taken care of all those steps, and on arrival it's going to be efficient. Is going to make a big difference in terms of whether people are willing to travel there, particularly when you're traveling with your family on pleasure. If it's a must-do business trip, as you said, yeah. But if it's a leisure holiday, you're going to want to make sure it's going to be painless.
Right. Absolutely.
So I guess your prediction there is that it's going to be a slow opening. And a lot of the smoothing of opening by country is going to happen based on government's ability to make the process easy to understand, as well as frictionless for the travelers.
And low cost. And I think as long as there's quarantine, I think people, if there's a choice between going to a destination where there's no quarantine and with quarantine, even if it's 2 or 3 days, I think people will opt. If everything else is the same, it's a great beach destination and great food destination, all that remain the same. People will gear towards destinations that are easy, low cost to get to, and there's no quarantine. Because at the end of the day, it's still additional cost to a family. If you're going to quarantine yourself for 3 days, it is additional cost. However you look at it,
and it doesn't excite you to start your holiday with 3 days in a hotel room.
Especially if you have young kids, that makes it even more difficult. So
let's go to my first prediction. I would say here maybe I was overly optimistic. My first prediction is that the Southeast Asia kind of regional travel will boom in Q1 of 2022. So I think it's really going to take off. Because I think it looks like the variant is, relatively. It's good that we were cautious, but looks like just like other variants, being vaccinated, having safe practices, and hospitalization rates are relatively low. Mm-hmm. So I think we will see markets continue to open up as the pace we were on, and particularly for Indonesians going out, maybe. Other markets coming to Indonesia will be a much slower roll, but I think Indonesia's doing outbound travel, and then needing to quarantine for, hopefully it's not 11 days, it's 3 days or 1 day when they come back. I think this will boom in Q1. I think Indonesians, when they heard about this Singapore VTL, boom, they were really interested to go there. All the flights were completely sold out. You couldn't get a seat to Singapore during this December period. Like literally overnight, everyone's like, boom, we're going there. So I think that shows there's a lot of demand for Indonesians to do outbound travel, and I think that will really boom in Q1.
I agree. I think Indonesians going out, again, I think Indonesians, for example, a lot of expats who are abroad now, or are they coming back, or they want to come here, they're all coming right now because they want to be with family here. The children are coming back, or spouses are coming back. But I don't know if Indonesians will travel in droves if they have to come back and quarantine for 10 days.
No.
Same here, right? I'm not going back because I don't want to come back and quarantine for 10 days. I think as long as that is there, that quarantine requirement is there, I don't think the travel will be crazy. But I think as soon as that goes down, even to 2-3 days, I think you're absolutely right. I think Indonesians, will travel. The outbound will be great to all over the world.
I was talking to Chris Chong, the CEO of Dudaya, just after this 11-day quarantine mandate got reintroduced, and he was saying that with the 3-day quarantine, there was a lot of demand for Indonesians willing to go, particularly to Europe, North America. When they came back 3 days, they could live with it, especially during this holiday period. But that the 11-day was just like, game changer, and cancellations were just flowing in. People just not willing to do 11 days. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense, right? I mean, again, high-end travelers might not be a problem for high-end travelers, but if you look at the mid-range, it's a lot of money to come back and quarantine yourself for 10 days.
I hadn't even thought about it. It's not just the time; it's the money.
It's the money.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money. A lot of times, it's actually the amount of money you would have spent on holiday somewhere. So I think that would be a huge deterrent in what you're forecasting. But yes, I'm hoping you're right.
My second prediction for Indonesia goes back to one of the things you were saying, very important we protect, which is the kind of boom in domestic travel. And I think this is going to continue to grow. And while some people think pandemic long term kind of makes travel smaller, I think it provides even a bigger opportunity. And two things drive that. One is when I do take a trip, particularly with family, maybe the family's more likely to stay longer. Right, they got to do all this PCR test, and rather than staying 2 days for the weekend, they stay a week. So length of trip, I think, will increase, and I also think frequency of trip for maybe not families, but just single traveler, or they can go and travel anytime because they could work from anywhere. So I think these two things will continue to provide good tailwinds for the growth of the domestic travel market.
I think you're right, Brad. And I think the other thing that's helped is I think a lot of, especially for Bali, for example, we had a lot of domestic travelers driving to Bali. Remember, for a while there was PCR requirement. For any time if you were taking a flight, you needed PCR. If you're driving, then antigen was sufficient. A lot of people drove. I have friends who actually drove.
Drove from Jakarta or drove from Surabaya?
From Jakarta.
Whoa. How many?
It's
how many hours is
12
that?
to 16 hours, right? Yeah.
18 hours?
Yeah. I think you can do it in 16 maybe. But yeah, 16, 18 hours.
Demas, are you driving to Bali for your next hop? No.
I'm not.
But a lot of people have. A lot of people would sometimes do one way and then have the driver drive back and they would fly back. Because then for a family of 4 to take PCR, that's a significant amount of money, right? So I think, and people have explored. I think people have explored, people have gone out there, traveled, seen places.
Sure, you can make the journey, the 18 hours, a trip by itself.
It is, and it's a road trip. And that's what people do, right? You stop in Jogja, Surabaya, a day here, a day there, and then a few more stops along the way. And it's a nice road trip, and then spend 4-5 days in Bali, and then either fly back or drive back. And I think a lot of people have explored. People that you would have never considered doing that have done it. And so I think you're right. I think we have a lot of new travelers that have not explored, are exploring. And I think you're right. Once you get the taste of it, you get the travel bug. It's with you. It'll stay with you for a long time.
Yeah, and mom and dad can work from wherever they end up in, so they can do the longer stay holidays. Yeah. Are you seeing this in some of your bookings already?
We are.
Yeah.
We definitely are. Especially when when schools were not open, we were seeing a lot of families working out of Bali. And why not? It doesn't matter, right? Dad can work from there. Mom can work. Kids, there was no real, online classes were online, so you could work and study from Bali.
Is this an invitation that the next leadership series will do from Bali?
If you remember, we were going to do this in Bali. We just couldn't get our calendars to work.
Okay.
So I'm more than happy to do, maybe end of Q1 or early Q2.
All right. Next episode.
With the background need to be at the beach.
Okay. Next prediction for 2022.
Do you think China is going to come back next year?
It's supposed to be your prediction. You're asking the questions now. I am not optimistic that China is a possibility anytime before Q4.
I'll agree. And I think, having tasted domestic tourism in Indonesia, I can relate to why China doesn't want to open up anytime soon. Because we have 270 million people and we are enjoying domestic tourism. In China's 1.4 now, 1.2 billion people.
It's a great point.
So why would they open up and take any risk when they're doing better than 2019 for the most part, right? And the other thing is you have Winter Olympics coming. So that it'll all be about like we are protecting G20. I think they will protect Winter Olympics, and you're
And
absolutely
protect
right.
the domestic travel
Domestic
market.
travel market.
Yeah. Well, I did some episode just by myself in this series talking about why Indonesia would lead in recovery, and the number one reason why Indonesia would lead in the Southeast Asia recovery is that we're a large domestic market, right? I mean, if you're in Singapore looking for the domestic recovery, I mean, it's tough. How many times can you go to Sentosa?
Non-existent, right?
Yeah. So I think I hadn't thought about that in terms of China thinking through when is it appropriate for them to open, but definitely even without some of the events like Winter Olympics, just protecting that growth and strong domestic market will be a big driver. That's a great point. So your predictions also Q4 at the earliest,
if not Q1 2023.
Great. Okay, my last prediction is going to be around MICE. So there's a lot of people who are quite negative on corporate travel, that, hey, corporate's going to be smaller than it is in the future, forever. Now corporations realize, wow, we can save so much money. People don't really need to travel. They can just Zoom call. But I think particularly in Indonesia, the domestic market, that corporate travel is really going to boom in 2022. We saw a big surge coming just before the holidays here in October, November, with MICE really leading the way. So it's kind of small, medium-sized MICE groups, and even some kind of larger groups and venues that are designed for much, much larger groups. Really pushing to get out and get people back together. So I think the fact that we're working in this asynchronous, geographically distributed manner makes getting together at hotels even more important for companies. So I think corporate is going to be back in Indonesia. Indonesians still really value face time with clients. The relationship is super important. I think companies getting their people together is also going to be a huge growth driver. So I am very bullish on MICE and corporate travel in Indonesia for 2022.
So you're talking about domestic MICE or international MICE?
Domestic.
I agree with you. I think international won't happen, but domestic, absolutely. And I think this is where organization like yours and organization like mine, we can work together and try and figure out, how do we promote this? How do we, and you're absolutely right. We just need to market this, and it'll be good to show people what you can do domestically. And with all the hotels we have, and in this case, competition has, all the different brands that have in all different markets, it is a huge potential. And with so many conference centers and huge ballrooms, huge meeting rooms around the country, as long as the cases don't spike and PPKM is kept at what it is right now, I think I am optimistic. It's a huge potential. The question is, just like how we did domestic tourism, where we marketed the hell out of it about domestic tourism with special offers, special rates, destinations, information, we need to do now the same with MICE. Because all the MICE we're getting now is predominantly government MICE. Like I said, thank you to the government, for Pak Jokowi and his team for supporting the economy. I think local corporates can do the same. I think the concern from local corporate is the cost. Do we still hold on to this? Because they're also uncertain, right? What will happen to their business? But having said that, a lot of businesses are doing phenomenally well. The digital space is doing better than 2019.
Yeah.
So there is money out there.
I think if I was a property or brand targeting this segment, I would definitely target government.
Yes.
I would definitely target government-owned or related companies. Yeah, and then lastly, companies who are thriving. They are excited to get people together. They are excited for their people to travel. So I think that's where I'd start.
And we just need to make them an offer they can't resist.
So that is it for my predictions. Any other predictions for you for 2022?
No, I think we've got it covered. And like I said, it's harder to go country by country because it really depends on the receiving country on what they do versus who's going to come first.
We didn't do too well in that exercise in March, so I will refrain from doing that.
Well, I think we still kind of did a little bit. I think we just did it from a segment perspective. versus country perspective.
Yeah, we can go back and look at our segment predictions, but I'm very confident that the domestic market will continue to perform well, assuming we don't get any big increase in PPKM levels. And I'm also very confident, based on what we were seeing in late October, November, that corporations and groups are ready to meet again in this market.
Well, let's hope we get it right. People aren't going to hear us anymore. We get it two times wrong in a row.
All right, Mesh, that's it for today. We will wrap up. I don't know if you have any closing words or kind of wishes for 2022 for you and your team.
No, I think let's all stay safe. Stay safe. We are nowhere out of the woods yet, but I think we are all seeing light at the end of the tunnel, and I think it's coming to us nice and bright. But we cannot put our guard down.
Yeah, just maybe a longer tunnel than anyone imagined.
Yeah.
But we are going in the right. What matters is that we're going in the right
There.
direction.
We see the tunnel. We see the light. It's just we don't know how far it is, right?
Ramesh, thanks so much for your time today. All the best for you and the team at Marriott for 2022.
Same to you, Brett. You and your team as well.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.